So it's 5 past. Welcome everyone once again on behalf of the UAI Education Committee. As usual, this will be recorded and published to the public to public stream. So if you do not like your image being shown during the records, turn off your camera and ask to speak off record at any time you want to say something that you do not want to be part of the videotape, and then we'll edit it out in the end. Thank you all. I'll leave it up to you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming, for participating in this meeting. I would like to invite some of you who want to do a prayer for everyone who volunteers to pray. Well, I will do the prayers. I will ask you please to mute your microphones. I can mute you. If I mute you, please forgive me for that, for doing that. I will mute you, but thank you. Please, after the prayer, I suggest to remain in silent receptivity for a brief time, okay? Close your eyes, sit comfortable, breathe. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for this meeting here and for your divine love that follows us now and in eternity. Dear Lord, help us to live in the Jesus love every day of our life and to love our brethren as you love us. Help us to be united in spirit and to better know how to serve and minister our fellows. Help and guide us to do a faithful and loving service to your revelation. Help us also to understand your teachings and give us the strength to follow your path. Vitalize us with your divine energy and spiritual insight. Not our will, but yours be done. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I will share my screen to share with you our study plan for today. Just a second, please. Please tell me if you can see my screen. Yes? Okay. Well, today, and this is our third session. In the previous two sessions, Gaetan shared with us very valuable concepts about how each one of us can become an effective spiritual and truth teacher, embodying the teachings we intend to teach. These words remind me something that Rodan of Alexandria said in paper 160. If something has become a religion in your experience, it is self-evident that you already have become an active evangel of that religion, since you deem the supreme concept of your religion as being worthy of the worship of all mankind, all universe intelligences. If you are not a positive and missionary evangel of your religion, you are self-deceived in that what you call a religion is only a traditional belief or a mere system of intellectual philosophy. If your religion is a spiritual experience, your object of worship must be the universal spirit reality and ideal of all your spiritualized concepts. All religions based on fear, emotion, tradition, and philosophy I term the intellectual religions, while those based on true spirit experience I would term the true religions. The object of religious devotion may be material or spiritual, true or false, real or unreal, human or divine. Religions can therefore be either good or evil. The American Heritage Dictionary defines evangel as one who promulgates or promotes something enthusiastically. This definition is appropriate, in my opinion, to describe a sincere believer in the Urantia Book that works to disseminate the Jesus teachings, promoting the revelation enthusiastically. This task can be performed by everyone who wants to serve the revelation, living sincerely and sharing its uplifting truth. In this way, we can become an effective spiritual and truth teacher and evangel of Jesus' religion. Says the revelation, to follow Jesus means to personally share his religious faith and to enter into the spirit of Master's life of unselfish service for man. One of the most important things in human living is to find out what Jesus believed, to discover his ideals, and to strive for the achievement of his exalted life purpose. Of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived. Says also the Revelation paper 195. The world needs to see Jesus living again on earth in the experience of spirit-born mortals who effectively reveal the Master to all men. Now, I would like to invite you all to share with us what aspects of the Jesus life or his teachings are the more appealing to you. How can we attain the great purpose of Jesus' earthly life? Is it possible to us? What do you think? Please, who want to comment? Hi, Joy. Nice to see you.
I had problems trying to find the number to get into this Zoom session.
I'm sorry, Joy. I would like to ask you also if you want to receive an email every week as a reminder of our session. Please type your email in the chat so I can send you the link.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Yes, Bob.
To answer your question, in my opinion, I think the two most important things Jesus said and did in his life was, one, remember to teach us that God loves us, and two, that all men are our brothers and we should love them. Those two things were the primary things, as I understand it, that Jesus came to earth to teach us, although we miss and concentrate other things as well, I think. At least that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any comments? Gaetan.
I would agree with Bob about those two things there. That God loves us as a father. That's what I got from reading the life of Jesus. And I think Jesus exemplified in his own life this concept. He never wanted to talk about anything else. That was always about his Father, doing the will of the Father, and being a true representative of this Father. And what really impressed me about Jesus, when I read it, remember, is that who sees me sees the Father. And that really impressed me because, we always wanted, to try to picture who the Father is. And he was the true expression of the love of the Father. And this is how we can best perceive the Father up to our level, I guess, to the level of being human. So for us to exemplify in our life the ideal of Jesus is being a true representative of that love of the Father towards our fellow men. And so that people, when they see us, they see that expression, that true expression of divine love flowing through us. And be you perfect as I am, that was a commandment of God. And I guess Jesus was truly exemplifying this truth in his own life, every day trying to achieve it and showing us the way how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetan. Who want to comment? I would like to share my view about what impressed me in the life of Jesus. Is very much the same as Gaetan said. His full dedication to do the will of the Father, his faith is something that impressed me very much. His absolute confidence in the goodness, in the protection, in the Father is something that I would like to possess myself, this confidence. It is my goal. I want to share this certainty, this life, this confidence as Jesus is. To me, it's a great motivation, something that really is, I feel like an impulse, an inner impulse, strong, to make the effort to attain that beautiful, beautiful manifestation. Thank you. Yes, Bob.
One thing that I admired about Jesus reminds me at Oklahoma State University, I was on the varsity debate team. Now, I learned a lot of how to present ideas and win arguments. So that background kind of helped me be impressed by Jesus' persistence of trying to present ideas repeatedly to the apostles where they weren't quite getting it. And so he'd find another way and another way and another way to present it. One of the problems was the idea of his kingdom. They just couldn't seem to understand it was a spiritual kingdom. And then whenever Jesus taught them, you must be born again, they couldn't understand how a full-grown man could come from his mother again. They just didn't quite get the spiritual concept. So my admiration and most impressions of Jesus was his persistence in running into these problems and never giving up, trying to find more and more ways. And that's why he finally went to parables, to try to get the idea across where they could understand it. Anyway, that was my impression of Jesus that I really liked. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else want to comment? Yes, Sam.
What I really liked about his life is his love for his fellow man, and that came through in his social abilities. He talked to everyone without judgment, and people from all walks of life. And this is something we can all aspire to do. Some people are more social than others, of course, but that is something, that is so actual still today for us. And of course, we all know you can't just love everybody, but just talking to people, getting their point of view, understanding them, that is, the way to loving people. And I always found that beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. I would like to also your reflections about how can we attain this great purpose that the Revelator says the world needs to see Jesus living again on earth in the experience of spirit-born mortals who effectively reveal the Master to all men. How do you think we can attain this great purpose? What which each one of us can do to this great manifestation, to attain this great manifestation, to be Jesus living again in earth? Yes, Joy.
Well, the two thoughts come to mind. First off, the Urantia Book says that we can exchange our mind for the mind of Jesus. And so I think that is done when we stop in the moment and ask, for Jesus' help in whatever situation is coming along. I think that the way we exchange our mind for the mind of Jesus is through prayer and communication with Jesus. And my second thought is that Jesus sort of evolved into the being who he was, right? So, I mean, he, of course, he had his personality, which we don't have his personality, but he grew up. So I don't necessarily expect myself to be, like Jesus as a full adult. In fact, if I could just be as good as Jesus when he was maybe 10 years old, that would be pretty good. But anyway, so those are my thoughts, that it's a process of kind of losing fear and getting in the habit of exchanging our mind for the mind of Jesus.
Thank you, George.
That's a great point what George just said, to change our mind for his. And I think is how we can do it is in every single moment, in every single activity we have in our interaction with other people, just to stop and think, what would Jesus do? And it is so interesting because sometimes we want to act accordingly to the moment, maybe to have an aggressive response or something that maybe is not what Jesus could have done. So just to think, if Jesus were here, how he or what he could do. And that single moment, just a second or 2 seconds, or in which we stop and think, give us another kind of sensation in our body, in our mind, and we can really try to give a peaceful answer or attitude to the person that is interacting with us. And something else that I really like about him is when he never tried to force the situation. He used to ask, and asking is the best way, because sometimes we can know what the people want, but when we ask, we make the people think that we are interested in them, and they change their attitude because of that, just because of that. And then the people start talking to us, and after that, they start questioning. And it's so nice. I like that part of him, and it's so contagious, and gives a great results. Well, that's what has happened to me, following that way of Jesus. Another thing, he was a thinker. We had to stop and think. Every single detail, every single moment, every single thing that happens around us. And something else, well, it's a lot of things. Discipline of mind. How he got to that point in which he could plan everything. He was never in a hurry. He was always peacefully doing things. It was because of his discipline of mind, or because of his personality, or because he thought, well, there's nothing else, or nothing fun with going fast, just maybe calm. I know in these moments, in this life, in this modern life, it's so difficult to do that. But it is interesting when we try to act as he used to do it in that moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Flora. Someone else want to comment? Yes, Gaetan.
That's a very good question. I remember reading about Jesus, well, when I was very young, but when I came to the Urantia Book, I was trying, mitigated with the idea that he was divine and human. And I was, most of the time, when I look at how to live like Jesus, or to exemplify his own example, was that, things that came to my mind, how can I do that? He was divine. Like I couldn't make a difference between his human self and his divine self. And this was a difficulty I had for many years, till I prayed to be enlightened, and I asked the Father to enlighten me as what was the difference. How could he accomplish, by being so young, so many things, like control his mind, like Flora was saying. How could he do that? How did he have all those thoughts when he was only an adolescent? How could he have that knowledge if he was only human? And I was struggling with the fact that Jesus was both human and divine. And then they tell us that after his baptism, his divinity took over of his whole personality. So, when we look back to Jesus, when they decided that he would be born in a Jewish family in that little city there, and they chose 3 different couples, and finally they chose this couple. So I guess they needed to be sure that the body that he would have would have the good genetics, good character. And it's not all of us that are born like this. We inherit the character of our own parents. And then they say that at the time that Jesus was born, the Jewish community had the best educational system for family life and all this. So he was, raised into, at the time, an ideal surrounding, which is not what we go through in life. Most of us, we don't exactly have the same education background that Jesus had as a human. So that there's a lot of difference there. So, and further on in the Urantia Book, I think I read or understood that he doesn't ask us to live exactly like being him. We'll never be able to be him, but we can strive to be an example of life like he was. And what he taught, what I got from it, from what Joy said, about boring Jesus' mind, I was struggling with that idea also. And I remember we had a study group about that, and different people shared their own idea of what this meant. And I can't remember exactly, someone shared something very differently than boring the mind of Jesus, or, just saying, what would Jesus do in that situation? And I thought the same, you know, what would Jesus do in that situation? But this person had another idea. What was Jesus doing when he came about in a difficult situation? What did he do? What has the Father? What is his will? And for me, you know, that was a different perspective on how to use Jesus' mind. And I think Jesus' mind, from my own perspective, was to do what he would do. And what he would do would ask the Father for enlightenment. So what I do in difficult situation, I think about Jesus, what he would do, Jesus. Well, he would pray to Father, what is your will, Father, in that situation? And this for me came to be an habit. So whenever I'm in a situation where I need it is very important that I share some truth, or that I'm in contact with person that I need to do something, you know, to help them out. I know of my human limitation. I know that I'm very limited in my knowledge of the others. So in doing like Jesus do, well, I pray the Father to enlighten me. What is this that I can do for those people? What, you know, and I tell the Father, you use the word that I can say to express to those people what is your will. And I think that's what Jesus was doing all the time. You know, anytime he was struggling as a human to find out what to do or what to say or where to go, he would pray to the Father for guidance. And I don't think he wants us to be exactly like him, like, you know, everything that he was. Nobody can be like another human being. We have to be our own because we all have different personality. And this is what God wants. He wants us to express the true potentials of who we are. A true human being expressing the will of the Father through that filter, because we are kind of an interpretation in some ways because of our own personality or our own experience. And from that day on that I understood that for myself, I stopped, you know, trying to be exactly like Jesus, because every time I read about Jesus, I said, geez, I'll never be able to be like him, you know. He's so perfect. You know, when you read about the personality of Jesus, when they describe him, when they talk about his faith, it's incredible. You know, you say, how can a human being achieve such a level of perfection? Well, in fact, he attained a level of light and life, and he could have fused them, you know, at this baptism. Well, he could not fuse because he's already a divine being. But he showed us a way, and probably I'm saying to myself, once we reach the mentioned world, when I reach the mentioned world, well, maybe when I get to Jerusalem, I'll be like the Jesus, like he was on earth, because they tell us we're going to have this beautiful, you know, our personality would be just not perfect, but a beautiful personality, you know. And I strive for that moment. So I guess everyone sees Jesus differently, and they get from Jesus different thing. So this is how I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetan. Hi, Ed. Welcome. Nice to see you. We are speaking about, reflecting about, let me see, just a second. Which aspects of Jesus' life or his teachings are the more appealing to us, to each one of us, and how can we attain the great purpose of the Jesus' earthly life, and if we think it is possible to us. And now we are speaking, commenting about how we understand, how we feel or think we can do to attain this great purpose of be like Jesus. This is our theme in this moment. Anyone else has some reflection to share about this subject? Well, I would like to share with you some reflections myself. I remember to have read the Urantia Book. I do not know exactly where, in which part of the book, but it says when you manifest the fruit of the Spirit, we are manifesting the characteristics that Jesus manifested in his life in this earth. So I think the spiritual transformation when you are born of the Spirit, in our inner search for the will of God, in our personal practice of the teachings, we are opening the door to the work of the Father in ourselves. And I think in this way, in our small scale, like Joyce say, not as the adult Jesus, but maybe like the child Jesus, or of course we are human. We are little compared with Jesus. But in some way, I think we manifest some aspect of this resemblance is the word, when you be like someone, when you become like someone else, like God, or like Jesus. I think this is part of the spiritual transformation, because we cannot be like Jesus with our own resources, without the help of the Father. It is something that our Father gives to us in the measure of our dedication to do His will. And I think also that the fruit of the Spirit manifested in the lives of those who love God is part of this manifestation, be like Jesus. Because all these fruits of the Spirit are divine love in action in us. So I think if you love God, we are a little like Jesus, each one of us. Thank you. Well, if you do not have any comments, we can continue with our schedule or plan for today. Do you agree? Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Well, I can't help but mention this. It occurs to me, one of the admirations I have about Jesus was how he knew so many things about so many people. Now, I ask the question, was Jesus able to read minds? You can think of some things that happened during Jesus' life that we know about, that kind of, you might want to say, how did he know that? Remember the white horse or mule, whatever it was, that he told him where it was and to go get it, that he rode into town? Remember that? How did he know that? You know, it's kind of controversial about the woman at the well that was a prostitute, how he talked to her. And although we know from what it tells in the Urantia book that she kind of expanded more of what Jesus knew about her than what we are told that he said. But that's demonstrated many times, and we know that he understood many times the minds of his apostles, how they were understanding things and what they were thinking about, you know. And I asked, now look, if we asked for the mind of Jesus, would we get that kind of talent? Well, we have to consider it, is it Jesus the man or is it Jesus the God? And I'm thinking maybe those talents were Jesus the God. You know, he could have changed things when he was on the cross or avoid the cross as Jesus the God. But I think I recall it saying that he chose not to use any of those powers. Anyway, it's just a thought. When you say you want to have the mind of Jesus, what are you going to really get? Just a thought. Thanks, folks.
I would like to say something. You touched a very important point. I think he had both, but as a human, as a mortal, he was a thinker and he was an observer. He used to spend time really, really looking at the things, thinking how they work. And one example of that is when with the fishes, when he told them where to send the nets and they caught a lot of fishes, it was because he was an observer. He was not just with them, but looking where the fishes were swimming, I don't know if it is the correct word, but swimming. And then he told them, send the nets to that point, and they caught the fishes. It was, and the revelators say that it was not because it was a miracle or because, no, it was just because he paid attention on that. And the revelators said in some part of the book, that is not nice from us Urantians, that we spend a lot of time thinking or just going through life without stop and think, without paying attention in the things that really matter. Maybe if we could pay attention in the people around us, we could really get those little details in which we can give something or we can change their lives. The problem with us is that life is going too fast, extremely fast, with a lot of things, and we have more and more things to do instead of being like him, never fast, stopping and thinking. As a mortal, as a divine, no, that's another word.
Thank you, Flor. Paul, you can speak.
Bob, really, I really enjoyed his comments, and I think what I admire about Jesus, I think, is the same, I guess, as the apostle who saw his rounded personality. But his tenderheartedness, I guess, is what is the characteristic quality. Revelation says we can't fully experience God's love unless we attempt to love our fellows according to the new commandment that Jesus made, to love our brothers and sisters as he loved us. And the comment that Jesus makes, whatever the Father reveals to me, I will reveal to you. And I think that the day will arrive on this world, but this has to start from early childhood. Remember that Jesus grew up in a nation that was the most God-seeking nation on earth. And since that time, no other national family has risen to the level of God searching as a Jewish nation did 2,000 years ago. But when the environment is right with our children, and they are taught the whole battle is against doubt, non-belief, then there will be men and women in this world that the Father knows all of his children intimately. And now, for 2,000 years, Jesus has been present with each and every human being coming to this world. Remember, at the time that he lived, a lot of people didn't even have thought of justice. They hadn't even made their first moral choice. But since the time of Jesus, they have been coming and volunteering and lining up for volunteer service on the nativity world of a Master Creator Son. And so in the training of teachers and leaders, we really must look at the situations that caused John the Baptist, Jesus of Nazareth, and those 12 apostles and those 70 evangels what made them devote their entire life to the mission of the Master? And we need to recreate the environment of loving service, the willingness to lay down our own lives and take up the assignments of the spiritual progression of this world and truly create new ambassadors of the Father and apostles of Christ.
Thank you, Paul. You finished, Paul? Because we lost the last word that you said.
We're on a satellite dish, and I don't think Zoom likes the delay going out to the satellite because it keeps flipping out on me, but that's sufficient. I just wanted to stress the need to create for our young people that environment of devotion that will, it was Elizabeth's visitation by Gabriel who preconditioned her son to that mission. Without that visitation, John the Baptist would not have been the forerunner of Jesus of Nazareth. And what we need to do is make those kinds of preparation in the minds of children that we see, whose ideal life and model career may be a spiritual teacher on this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Samantha.
No, I just wanted to say that Paul had raised his hand digitally.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, Gaetan.
Very interesting concept, what just Paul said, and also what, who was it, Flora said about the mind of Jesus, and also Bob, and this idea that replicate what Jesus was, asking ourselves, was he human or was he divine when he acted? And like Paul said, you know, how did he know what the other person thought, you know? And even from afar, you know, but of course he was a good observer of people, you know, and as a fisherman, my brother is a good fisherman. He can tell you where the fish is by looking at the lake itself, you know, the current, you know, and I went fishing not long ago and he said the fish are over there, and sure enough they were there. So there is observation and I guess Jesus was a master observer of man and nature. And as a youth, he was always observing, meditating, and being in contact. So how did he know then what other people thought? And I thought about this idea a long time ago, and someplace in the Urantia Book they say that the thought adjuster always communicate with each other. Was it possible that Jesus, being in contact with his own thought adjuster so closely, you know, because of his relationship, you know, his psychic circle where he was at, that the thought adjuster would convey to him what the other person was needing as a lesson or as a word? If thought adjusters talk among themselves and we truly want to do the will of God, when those thought adjusters manifest in our own mind what the other person thought adjuster knows about that person and what they need. Why are the psychic circles so important? And I think Jesus, you know, has achieved those 7 psychic circles in his own lifetime, very, you know, at the time of baptism. And at the end of the book, what did they say? That man needs to establish better communication with his own thought adjuster. So imagine if each of us would strive to be that person like Jesus was, by reaching up to those circles of faith, of accomplishment. Maybe we would be a little bit more like Jesus. We'd be able to see what other people's needs are by just, you know, reflecting on them or wanting to help them. But most of the time when we want to help people, we want to do what we believe, you know, not what exactly they need, but what we believe we think they need. We're going to tell them what to do, you know. Most of the time we're like this. And Jesus was not like this. He was giving to the other what truly they needed. And how did he know that? And I guess, Bob, at the answer, it truly was the act of God, but we all have a part of God within ourselves. And we need to let that part of God take more place within us, in our mind. And I think that's how Jesus did it. More and more as he went through life as a human being, he let that part of God manifest itself within himself. And like Paul said, you know, if we do in the young people of today create an environment where their beliefs are supported by facts, you know, by our own example, maybe we can make this world a better place where tomorrow those young people will go forth and proclaim those truths by the way they live their life. We don't need to be a dictator to those young people. You know, they will choose eventually their own ways, but we need to create the environment in which they can evolve spiritually. So that's my thought. Thank you. Bob wants to speak.
Yes, Bob. Thank you, Gaetan.
Gaetan has some very good points. I've got to ask some questions here, though. Could it be that Jesus had a little edge that we didn't have? Now we are told that some parts in his life where he communicated with his adjuster. I know it tells us in the UB, but I don't recall when did he first start establishing recognized communications with his adjuster. I don't remember when. I think he was well in communications with his adjuster when he's doing his public teaching, working with the apostles for 3.5 years. And make a note, we have a term that might describe some of Jesus' talents today. It's actually a fact. We have people that have the talent, even teach it to others, called remote viewing. Now, did the adjuster tell Jesus where the white mule was or donkey was? Or did he see that through some type of remote viewing? Just a question. Think about it. I don't know the answers. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Bob.
Gaetan, sorry.
No, please, you, Flor.
You know what? Gaetan just made a very interesting point. He said Jesus about the adjusters. And I remember that one of the things that he did was to show God a better way, a better man, a better way of living this life as a mortal life. So maybe that was one of the things he achieved that we could achieve if we work as mortals, to have a great communication with our thought adjuster at the point in which they can communicate the adjusters and we can perceive that. This is something I didn't think about. Thank you so much, Gaetan. It is you just opened another door, and another one. Thank you.
Thank you, Flor. I was about to talk about this, say something very similar that you say, Flor. I think the key here is communication. But you know a lot about prayer. Prayer is our formal communication with the Father. But many times we forgot to be receptive and listen the answer. And this does not mean that we will listen a voice or nothing like that. Be receptive is allow the Father the opportunity to speak to our soul or remain in communion. That is what Jesus did during his whole life since he was a little child. And I think in my study of the the life of Jesus and his teachings, this is something very important. Of course, we need also study, we need to observe, we need to meditate, reflect on meanings, but this communion with the Father is something that has, as the Master said, worship, thought Jesus makes one increasingly like the being who is worshipped. Worship is a transforming experience whereby the finite gradually approaches and ultimately attains the presence of the infinite. I think this is the key. We need more, how can I say what the word? When we synchronize or we attune with the Spirit of the Father, be receptive. And in this way, I think we can be more sensitive to the guide of the Spirit. And as Rodan said, this requires practice. Thank you, my friends. Anyone else want to comment? Yes, Ed?
Hi. Well, this is interesting because as people were talking, I look back in my trials and tribulations and where I've been on this planet, walking around or whatever it was. And certain things happened where I was involved with another person, or I was going to meet another person, and I kind of just shrugged off of the situation, which I find out later on that my inner self was telling me, look at what did you do that for? You know, can't you stand up and at least you know, be my teacher for these situations? I'll give you a couple of them that happened to me. One, I was coming back from the 1972 Democratic Convention in Miami, Florida, and I was hitchhiking. And I was hitchhiking through Texas, and I got picked up by guess who? President Johnson's Secret Service man. This was after he retired. And he asked me, he says, do you want to meet the president? I thought he was joking. I says, well, I don't know, what's this mean? He says, well, I'm his Secret Service agent. He says, I live at the ranch with him. And I says, if you go in there with me, you can meet him. Now, I had the Urantia book in my backpack. It was not that I was going to show him the Urantia book, because I knew better to do that. But here was an idea that this terrible war was going on, and he had the opportunity to speak to one of the demonstrators who was talking about this situation, and I passed on it. And for all of these years, I've looked back at that and I said, that could have been a great meeting, you know. Now, that's just one of many times that I have, you know, cowardly left these type of situations. And I think that if we look back at our lives, and every person we meet is an opportunity to the means to the end. And I feel badly that I'm getting better at it now. From now on, I say to myself, I will never, you know, shrug off my responsibility, and I will get into the conversation and see where it goes. Because we know the truth, because we've had it, 2,000 pages of it for 40 years or so. Anyway, that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Well, if you want, we can continue with the next subject of this meeting. I will share my screen and ask for a volunteer to read. No, sorry, this is not. This is. You can see my screen. I can. No. Who wants to read? Please, one volunteer.
I will read.
Glad to read. I read last time, though, a lot. So would somebody else want to jump in before I do?
¿Qué tal?
No, go ahead, Marjorie. You're better than me at reading English text, so.
Okay, Jeannie, you want me to start at the very top at 156.5.7? Is that where you want me to start?
Yes, here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Forceful ambition, intelligent judgment, and seasoned wisdom are the essentials of material success. Leadership is dependent on natural ability, discretion, willpower, and determination. Spiritual destiny is dependent on faith, love, and devotion to truth, hunger and thirst for righteousness, the wholehearted desire to find God and to be like Him. Effective and wise leadership. In civilization, very much depends on an enthusiastic and effective load-pulling spirit. 10 men are of little more value than one in lifting a great load unless they lift together, all at the same moment. And such teamwork, social cooperation, is dependent on leadership. The cultural civilizations of the past and the present have been based upon the intelligent cooperation of the citizenry with wise and progressive leaders. And until man evolves to higher levels, civilization will continue to be dependent on wise and vigorous leadership. Leadership is vital to progress. Wisdom, insight, and foresight are indispensable to the endurance of nations. Civilization is never really jeopardized until able leadership begins to vanish, and the quantity of such wise leadership has never exceeded 1% of the population.
Thank you, Marjorie. I would like to ask you regarding this text that contains very much instruction, many things to think. What qualities do you expect to see in a leader? And why the Revelator said, until man evolves to higher levels, civilization will continue to be dependent on wise and vigorous leadership. This means that we will not need any more civilization leaders in the distant future. What do you think? Thank you. Any comments?
I'll comment.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
what qualities? Well, the first thing I'm looking at when I see a leader is that they be authentic to his own belief, which means that he must be what he wants the other to do. And too many times we see leaders wanted people to do things while themselves they have never done these things, or they wouldn't want to do these things. And Jesus was a great leader because he went through life as such a leader. You know, he went through with all the difficulties of life. He was not born rich. He worked through to gain enough money to become independent, to help his family. And, you know, these are quality in meekness and humbleness, you know, among leaders, and to live by the truth, to live by their own belief. These are, and while reading a book many years ago about leadership, one of the things they say, good characters are very important in leadership. If you don't have a good character at a certain age, very hard to change who you are. You know, if you have not mastered your own character, well, it's going to be very hard to do so when you grow, when you're older. So you better have a good background in how you react to different situations. So, and why today we need leadership? Well, if you look around, you know, leaders are always people that run with the flag. You know, they do things on their own. They take initiative, and they do whatever it takes to accomplish whatever they set their mind to accomplish. And when you go in the mass of people, even among us Urantia Book reader, you know, a lot of us fail to pursue our own initiative. We lack willpower to accomplish what we set our mind to do. I remember one commenter later said when they gave the book and the 70 came together, and they said, well, you're just lukewarm, you know, like they were not inflamed with that truth, with a lot of enthusiasm. They were just lukewarm about it. This is how they described them. And the 70, they were pretty much disappointed by this remark, you know. And sometimes I see myself like this, you know, that I'm lukewarm for some ideas. I don't pursue them like I should. So what is it that sometimes I'm asking myself I'm lacking? Is it faith in what I do? You know, I guess we can all be leaders in some ways. Are we leaders of our own life, first of all? Do we lead a life like Jesus did, you know, like do we control our mind? Are we subject to, like Rodan said, you know, are we subject to the impulsion and the desire and the attraction of life, or do we direct all those three towards higher goal? And I'm the first sinner, you know. Sometimes I succumb to the material life, you know. And I think good leaders can in fact get away with all these material things. I mean, spiritual leader. We're not talking here about just political leader. We're talking about spiritual leader, and we can all be good spiritual leader in our life when we start living what we want the world to become. And I remember reading that somewhere, be the change that you want in the world. And I think this is good leadership, you know, by being those change ourselves. And that's why I say we always teach who we are. And if you don't do that, well, no matter what you do, people will see through you. If you're trying to teach them things that you're not, they look at you like a fraud, you know, like a liar, you know. So today, I think a lot of people, their mind is not yet conscious of all this spiritual reality, and they're in a dream state. You know, they're sleeping, I guess. And I guess leadership needs to be, like Jesus said, born of the Spirit again. And once we are born of the Spirit, I remember the example of my wife, you know, many years ago. And I was fortunate to have that experience in my life, to have a wife that, you know, is truly engaged in what we're doing. And it's not the case for a lot of people, you know. Some women might have husbands that are not, you know, doing what they're doing, or do not believe exactly what they're doing, and they're not supportive of what they're doing. But I was fortunate enough to have a wife that one day was born of the Spirit, and I saw it with my own eyes. You know, before this happened, she was always asking questions: why would I do this? Why would I do that? Why would I give money for this? You know, taking more interest in the material value of things than on the spiritual value. And then someday, someone, you know, she wanted to be with me. She wanted to do things with me, but she knew that she didn't have that same faith. One day our ways would part, you know, we would not be together. And she prayed. And she prayed to have that same faith in her life. And one day it happened, and I was there when it happened, you know, and it was a truly a momentous moment for me to be witness to that. When someone, you know, becomes truly enlightened, you know, that he knows God is within themselves, and it's truly a moment of being born of the Spirit. But that's only the first, you know, when people are born of the Spirit, we're probably all born of the Spirit, which means we enter the kingdom of God. But that's only the first step. We just crossed the threshold. What do we do after that? You know, they say that once you're in the kingdom of heaven, you have to work hard to keep there, you know, to stay there and to progress in that kingdom. And I think that's one of the problems that we're facing today. A lot of people have entered the kingdom, but then when they see, oh no, I'm more interested in my material life than in that spiritual life, so they devote more time to their material life, and they get out the door, you know, they go back out. And it's a challenge for us as human to become our own leaders in what we believe. And I think leadership is being true to oneself. It's a great quality that I would look in someone. And that to follow that example, you know, when you look at a leader, you look what they do, and this inspired us. And the leader has to be inspiring. How did he do that? By being what we strive to become, by being more. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. Now we have a tendency to look at leadership that every time, you know, we look for their misstep, and if they do a misstep, you know, we're ready to crucify them sometimes. I don't know why we do that. You know, we're very hard judge of our own leaders, you know, and we have to be like Jesus, you know, very forgiving, because we're still human. So leaders, you know, have their own downfalls. They're human like us, and they might have their own difficulty going through life. And we have to have enough love towards them to accept those weaknesses that they might have. And Jesus is a true example of the leaders, you know, but he was perfect in all ways, but we're not like him. And I think in the future, when more people get the example of true leadership and they be born of the Spirit, they'll want to become like this. So good leadership will train other leaders. And that's one thing leadership has to do, is train other leaders. And there were many books about that. You know, if you don't train new leaders, there's some that will come about, but it'll take a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetan. Yes, Bob, go ahead.
Okay, Gaetan has some very good points, but we must build on those. Here's the problem. We don't know the examples. For example, government on a nearby planet. All of their leadership is developed through various schools, from the very basic of local town government all the way up to leaders of the nation. They have to go through a school being taught certain things, including honesty and morality. Now, that is the biggest problem we have in our nation. When you want leaders, Christian leaders, really good, honest Christian leaders, we've had a shot at it, but he didn't get elected because there was a higher percentage politically, how do I say this, of non-Christian, I guess, non-faith that controlled the vote. In our country at this time, we have probably the biggest dishonesty, even through our major media, where corruption is so bad that it's very hard for a real good moral leader to get in position of leadership. We have some of them in our Congress and our representatives and senators, but not near enough. Now, I am told that the Urantia Book, as I recall reading, is for the future, sometime later on, that it will be far well more known. Well, by then, leadership of government on a nearby planet will be better known, I guess. The problem we have is, how do we influence morality in our political domain. That's very, very hard. It's very hard to get good leaders up there that way. You got to get, well, I'll say it this way, you got to get the bad guys out of influence. And to do that, you got to get them published so the whole people know about it. And we're not doing too good on that. We need to work on that. So whenever you work on yourself with being a good leader, you influence others, but it's a very small minority compared to what we need. How do we get it expanded rapidly to be effective currently or recently? That's a real challenge. Thanks, folks.
Well, I just wanted to come back to some of the texts that Gaitan used last time as attributes for good leader. It said, be fair, exercise self-control, and exhibit due restraint. Show proper respect for the personalities of your pupils. And I think that are very important human aspects to have as a leader, albeit in Urantia community or elsewhere. And that is something attainable, but has to be worked on through, like Jeannie said, worship and prayer, the balance of character. But those are very important qualities, I think.
Thank you, Sam. Someone else want to comment? It seems that Paul is frozen. Yes, Marjorie.
I've been thinking about this a good bit, and in our study group this last week, we read the one political part of the entire Urantia book, which is, of course, in the Jesus Papers, when he's giving some of his talks when he gives his talks at Urmia. And it brings a number of things to mind, and that is that we, in other sections of the book, when we're reading, we have to understand that from the government on another planet and other portions is that we're still participating in evolution here. And evolution is slow, and sometimes it becomes retrograde. And if you're in a point in history, because we're part of, each in our own countries and in our own province or state, if we're in a place where this retrograde portion of history is playing itself out, I feel that personally, I can only stand for truth as I understand truth, but that it is incumbent on me as a religionist and as a believer and as a follower of Jesus that I remember the gospel first. And I pretty much now have gotten to the point to where I judge most statements in terms by leaders and pundits and politicians and commentators or whatever, however you want to spend your time and your energy, as to just how much of the gospel is, and I'm not saying this as trying to, as much make a religious statement as I'm trying to make a moral, ethical statement, which is, am I recognizing people as children of God, as my brothers and sisters? And if the answer to that question is pretty much no, then, you know, then I have to go through a series of questions about, well, is there a reason why not? Is there, you know, and at times I've gone through that series of questions and I find out that their truth and my truth are obviously not connecting in some way or another. I can't support necessarily their truth. I still cannot leave, I cannot now unascribe them to not being a child of God. Even though I have identified that they are not embracing truth, my truth, as I define truth, or beauty or goodness, I still can't totally deny their sonship. And so I that doesn't mean that I support what they think, believe, do, or promulgate. But I still have to live in the gospel. And I personally feel that I'm in a time of very retrograde history in my own country. And another real good friend of mine who is a very, very avid Urantia Book student and who I consider a pretty bright man, when a lot of this was going on, he actually lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. And when a lot of that was going on, and even before, he had called me and he had said, I've kind of come to a theory that there are times, much like when Melchizedek appeared to keep goodness and truth alive, that there are times that the demarcation between good and evil must be very stark, and we must make choices. Somewhat perhaps like the Lucifer rebellion, not to that level. Nothing could ever, I don't think, get to that horror of a level. Again, at least I pray not. But there are times that we have to make choices, and there are times when situations are called for on this planet where the demarcation between good and evil must be made very stark. And I think perhaps, you know, I can think back in history and think of times when that's actually happened. World War II and the Nazis come immediately to mind, but other things like the you know, different times where people have been annihilated. Just, you know, they've tried to totally annihilate another population. These are times where, you know, we're called upon to make decisions, and the demarcation, in other words, dark must be made very dark and light must be made very light. And in some degree, I feel that is possibly where my country is right now. However, I still have great, tremendous hope. Now, for the future, when your question about will we not need leaders in the future, Jeannie, I think that's a really good question. It's something that is very intriguing, but I think there's kind of an answer to it when we read and when they give us glimpses into planets that are settled in light and life. And that is that when we are all on or the majority of people on a planet are constantly seeking to do the will of the Father, then the Father and Michael and Mother have become the leaders of the planet, and their representatives. And then our need won't be for like single leaders. We may, much like a lot of government in our system and in our local universe is done, it's done by a group. it's never done by a single person, and it's representative, truly representative, which of course they talk about in the book as being a very good way for governments currently and in the future to be handled. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and I agree. You know, Bob has said some very thought-provoking things, and I thank you, Bob, for that. And so has Paul. And the thing about education and our children, I think, is paramount, particularly in this day and age, because we need to think about the leaders in the future and what we're sending into the future. So I've talked way too long, but I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Marjorie. I appreciate very much what you said, and I agree with you. I think this is the answer to why we will not need more leaders in the future. Exactly, as you say. Yes, Bob?
Marjorie has a real good point, very difficult to work with, where good and bad, the division line. I had the fortunate to be able to take a UBIS course that studied the 12 apostles in great detail throughout the Urantia book, particularly part 4. One thing that amazed me when I learned about doubting Thomas, we most think his reputation at first is that he's not too smart. Turns out he had a brilliant mind. On any given issue or subject, he could see further along than most others could. That's why he asked so many questions. And he observed Jesus, and it tells us, remember this in UB, he observed Jesus use some of their scriptures to make a point in the synagogue, but avoided using others. And he asked Jesus about that one time in private, remember? And Jesus told Thomas, many of your brethren are not ready for this because of their education experience in the synagogue. So I will answer your question, but don't talk to them about this until I have gone. And he said, Thomas, all religions have some truth, and all religions have some falsehood. Scriptures are written by man, not by God. And so they have influence of truth or non-truth. And this shocked Thomas, but he never spoke about it until after Jesus had died. Now, here's our point. We are supposed to accept all our brothers, love them, and accept them whatever they are. Now, I have a stepbrother that was raised with me since diapers, and he and I disagree a great deal. I sent him the Urantia book. He returned it a month later and said he couldn't buy it because he found one thing that he disagreed with. He turns out to be a fundamental religionist. Yet we continue talking about the good and the bad and the difficulty of trying to judge people and accept them. Judge not, lest you be judged. Is that not true? How do we address that? How do we tell whether somebody is on the good side or the bad side? You take it and a benefit of doubt. Because remember, it tells in Urantia book, God doesn't judge you by what you do. He judges you by your intent. So perhaps we ought to have a good intent to love and show it with every man. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any other comments?
Was you raised this hand?
Yeah, just a couple of points on this leadership. First one is there's a part in your Urantia book that says about how we get to have faith, and there are two ways to get to faith, and one is when you are a truth seeker, so you are a self-starter, you want it inside you and you go for it unprompted. And the other one is to be influenced by those who show the love, by the love and the life of people who are good examples. These are the two ways. Now, when we think about progress, whether it's our own or the one of civilization, it's finite, I mean, at least on this world. And and progress requires to do something that wasn't done before. So you need to do something. You need to be creative. You need to be that self-starter. You need to have that leadership or that truth-seeking desire. And when you get to a point where there is no such much progress to make, like for example, if you think about what could be the stage of light in life, the civilization is pretty stabilized in many ways as a group, and also as individuals, as we have read, there is a much higher percentage of the population being highly spiritually inclined. Let's put it this way. So in that stage, the question I would ask is, what are the what's the percentage of leadership? Are those self-starter, the true spiritual people, aren't they leaders? And is there a need, as much of a need of leaders to influence others, to help others, having that to inspire others, as there is now on our world that is much more retarded, where you have a lot of people who are kind of they just follow as is, and they need a little something to push themselves. So I guess that's what inspired me this discussion.
Thank you, Gales. Any other comments? Yes.
I would like to say something about what Marjorie said about stark contrast between dark and light in leadership. And it is true that sometimes some condition that comes up in each of us, our country, bring us to the realization that we have to make a choice. And sometimes good leaders, and when, any kind of a situation, might be a war somewhere, might be discrimination towards the people, maybe something to do about religion liberty, how people dress, or abortion, or or whatever. And then when you're really involved in this world and you want to make some change, you want to be part of the change, you always have much interest in what's going on. So any of those subjects are of interest because they help society progress and people make choice. And people then look at leaders, what do they say? And I remember every time there's a thing that happened, I read good news, good newspaper. We have to be use discernment in what we read today. So we need to have good source of information. And then when I read these things, I look at what people say, and there's always some people that demonstrate some leadership, and they will explain some of the facts that are in front of us, and helps us make a choice. And what I look at in those people is their morality, where they come from. What is it how do they live their life? And for me, this is a quality in leadership that's very important. Who are these people that, suggest different change or different ideas? And these people help us make good choice because they point to the real value of situation. Even I have conflict sometimes with making decision concerning certain issue. And I know that the decision that I make concerning those issues will affect my life, of who I am as an individual. And it goes, as far as how do I treat, the First Nation people? How do I think about them? How do I treat people on the streets? What do I think about them? How do I treat people that are, you know, they have problems with drugs? You know, what do I think about them? In all those issues, you know, leaders have to go, you know, have to make decisions about these situations, about abortion, about homosexuality. You know, these are all problems in life, about the liberty of religion, what we should allow and not allow. And where we are asked to choose in some ways, to make a position. And I think that when each of us makes position our own choice, those choice then reflects on the people surrounding us. They have an effect because we will talk about it. You know, when there's something very current in the newspaper, you know, very everybody talks about it. It's an opportunity for us, as we know the truth, to tell what we think about those situations. But we need first to investigate and to reflect and to meditate. I remember sometimes I will meditate in the morning and think about a certain issue, you know, about a war, about a situation, and ask God to enlighten me. What is the best position for me to take? You know, do I see all the angles? Or do I manifest too much sympathy for the one that don't want to help themselves? So a good leader needs to find the right balance between what's light, what is dark, and then makes his choice. And then he will enlighten people. And some people will follow whatever they want to follow. You know, if you see more light, well, if you're attracted to light, you will go towards that light. So this is my thought anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaetan. Anyone else? Yes, Bob.
Well, I'll change the subject just a little bit here. One of my favorite papers is paper 49. You know, the one that tells us about all the different kinds of life and all the different kinds of environment and planets and all that. Well, when I read that, it really rang a bell really, really hard because of my background experience in the military and as Assistant State Director for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. I was privy to an awful lot of contacts, both public and a great volume of private, where various peoples in our organization, civilians or military, had contact with life from other planets. Now look, I know most of you read and study and understand it tells about life on other planets, but I have found very, very few students of the Urantia book that can accept, even though the evidence is all around them, that can accept that happening now. Now, the reason I mention it, because many of them are far, far, far more advanced in moral and spiritual development. And many of them tell us, our contacts, whoever they're talking to here on earth, you are very lucky. You don't know how lucky you are to be the world of the cross, to have Jesus here for his seventh bestowal. You're very lucky. You're ignorant. You don't know how lucky you are. They make it very clear that they envy us because of that, but we don't seem to understand it. Now, here's the problem. Sooner or later, it's going to come out in public. It's all over the internet now that there are many, many people on other planets, 95% of them good guys, 5% of them bad guys, that are watching what we're doing and even in line to help us when we're ready. The Urantia book is known by at least 2 ET groups because the contacts they had asked them a number of questions, and those Earth contacts were told, for those answers, you have it in the blue book with 3 concentric circles. Check it out. They know about the Urantia book, and they made the point. Now, we assume some of the people that gave it to us may be considered ETs, I guess. Anyway, we're sitting on a, how do I say this? We're sitting on a huge pile of ability to do something if we'll just study what we got and get involved. Anyway, just a figure of thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I would like to ask you, reading this text that we are sharing here in the chat, it says, such teamwork, social cooperation is dependent on leadership. And it says also, leadership is vital to progress. Wisdom, insight, and foresight are indispensable to the endurance of nations. Civilization is never really jeopardized until able leadership begins to vanish. So this social cooperation in our movement also is necessary, this social cooperation. We cannot work alone. We need to work with our fellows. We need to increase our union, work in groups. This is, I think, as Gaetan already said many times, study groups are a great tool to attain this social cooperation, to increase friendship, and to contribute one another, discernment, and help to strengthen our union, our work together. So what do you think we can promote this leadership? I know it has been commented in some way by everyone, but what part of this wise leadership in the world, not just within our movement or within any religion, but in general, how could we promote moral values, true moral values, true courage in leadership? What do you think?
His hand mechanically, electronics.
Okay, I'll say just one thing. I remember reading one book from Viktor Frankl that says, you know, when an opportunity arises, when an occasion arises, you need to take responsibility for it. And I think for leadership around the world to rise to the occasion, they need to be responsible for their actions. And not only the people themselves, the country themselves, they need to be responsible for whatever decision they make. And sometimes, you know, we have this sense of liberty. And one comment that Jesus did to his apostle that always I was striving for was, you were taught to sin. And I was always wondering, what is he referring to? We were taught to sin. How do we learn? How were we taught to sin? Well, what exactly does that mean? You know, and I've asked the question around, and a lot of people said it has to do with false liberty, unbridled liberty, and good leadership across the world need to take responsibility for their decision, you know, for their liberty of doing things. And not long ago, I was reading a little text there about education, and they were talking about kids. And this text was shared on Facebook. It says that children are born loving. You know, well, in the Urantia book, they said so much that children are optimists, you know, by birth. And then in that little saying, it says, but we teach them to hate. And I found that very enlightening as a comment, you know. And sometimes leaders, they teach people to hate, or they teach how to love. And we see that a lot around here, a lot of these days, you know. Leaders, what they exemplify is to hate the others, to create barrier walls between people. And, you know, that's just a reflection. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Vietnam. I think wise leadership has a very profound meaning, right? And maybe we should, I know there are concepts in Urantia book that we will study in the next session regarding how can arise good leadership in this world. But it is important to, as Gaetans said, to think and meditate in these concepts, to explore our own concepts and to discover and to have a personal discovery regarding the ideals that we should foster in ourselves and in others, of course. Anyone comment? Yes, Bob?
Reference to leadership. In 1957, I graduated from high school and I was awarded 2 scholarships. I applied and was accepted at Oklahoma State University. And I was surprised to get an invitation for that summer before the fall semester started to a 6-week paid 6-week course on leadership. Only 30 of the whole freshman 1,500 class got an invitation to that. So I went, and I was quite surprised. I thought at that young age that leadership was just natural. You just kind of evolved into it. I didn't know you could teach and develop leadership. Now, after my college session of 3 semesters, I got notice from the draft board and I had to beat that, so I joined the Air Force. Working through my Air Force career, I found out they have leadership schools for staff. When you make staff sergeant, before you, or as soon as you get that rank, you got to go to something they call NCO Leadership School, which is really, really good in teaching you how to lead men. Now, the edge of the military is you issue an order, they got to follow it. It's not because they want to, they have no choice. That's a military law. But you will notice as people work through the ranks, they become a general. What happens when they retire? Guess what? They become leaders. We've had presidents that were military. We have senators and congressmen that were military. We have vice presidents, secretary of states. We have it all through our government and through our governors that were military because they learned leadership. It's learned, it's taught. Some with Christian theo backing and some not so much. But leadership is learned, taught, not natural. And that really impressed me. Our problem with the Urantia book is we need to teach a lot more leadership, types of leadership. We got a lot in the Urantia book, and I've tried to take all the courses I could in UBIS and Urantia and anything international offers, and I've completed 32 courses over the last 10 years. I was a leader of various kinds in the past, but how do you pass it on? Look at the sons of leaders. Guess what senator we have whose two fathers and grandfather were generals and had great leadership? Do you recognize that? I'll leave it to you to think about. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Bob. Gilles, can you speak?
Yes, I think one of the questions was about how to, help people being more spiritual or more, I don't know exactly what word you said, more ethical. And I think I want to echo what Gaetan was saying, is that people have to be responsible for themselves, and we have to be responsible for ourselves first. And that's where it starts. And then when it comes to leadership, well, let's be leader ourselves. Let's progress ourselves, and let's be leader. Which brings the question then, what do we do then? And what are we doing as a Urantia community? I think I see a lot of great things going on, but leadership is about coordination and working together. And let's just say, I think there are some obvious ways where we can be better at it, just within our very, very, very tiny, small community. And then I would say, well, a lot of the things that I see happening are inbreeding. And I think the whole name of the game should be about, spreading our wings. And and I think for that, we'll have to be in all over the place, which ties the spirituality to all aspects of our civilization, science, politics, education, and all that. And in my opinion, my personal opinion, on top of all the coordination that we should improve upon the various groups in the Urantia community, is I think we should have think tanks. I see a lot of things, happening, and people arguing left, right, center on Facebook and others and all that. But what about being constructive? Like, there is a very concrete paper in the Urantia book about the government of another planet. So I think we need to think and take the responsibilities not only of ourselves, but also of as leaders. And we have the tools, we have the best tools that men can as I think has ever had, because the Urantia book is nothing else than a snapshot of the best thinking of mankind throughout history up to the point the Urantia book was published. And so with that in our hands, and of course all the spiritual tools that we have and all that we have learned in the book and throughout our experience, it's our responsibility to bring it to the next level. It's not something to sit on our butts and let the angel do all the work and whatever extraterrestrial and all that. It's our responsibility. So I think we need to think hard and coordinate our efforts to make that happen. And I think one good way could have I like the word think tank. Take the great thinkers and the great information that we have and get it to the next step. And once we have it in written, then action, just action, not within the Urantia community, but throughout the whole world. Oh well, I got inspired.
Thank you, Gilles. Yes, Paul. Do you want to speak, Paul?
Yeah. The Revelation tells us, when they make a frank statement about leadership, that there's 1 in 1 million leaders on this world, then the real potential for those, for really, what is spiritual leadership? In other words, forging the way forward in building the family of God on earth. I guess we need to have a really deep study of real potential. Like, for example, they said that, and so he was very valuable in knowing what the potentials of these young people are, whether they were good leaders or not. And then the second part is the educational, the technique which is a training of leadership that Dave was talking about, which is critically important because the Revelation says a man, even though he's the most brilliant man ever born on earth, can amount to nothing without proper education. So we need to look at all of those things and see if we can come up with a modern day training like those 4 years that Jesus gave to the original 12 of the kingdom builders of this world. That's it.
Thank
I
you.
hope you got all that. I don't know how clear these feeds are coming in, but okay.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Excellent. Yes, Ed, go ahead.
I was just telling Paul that it came in quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I enjoyed very much listening. I have learned very much today. I hope you have enjoyed also. Sorry for my mistakes speaking English. Thank you very much for coming.
English is very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next Saturday. Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. Pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Have a great week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
you too.
Bye.